Today's episode of What's on Your Bookshelf is brought to you by Insignia Training Partners, the leaders in outsourced L&D talent and resources. Insignia is a full-service learning and development company that provides L&D talent to design, develop, and deploy your training solutions. Insignia specializes in providing the right resources for your projects at a fraction of the cost as opposed to bringing on new full-time employees. This includes fractional Chief Learning Officer services for enterprise training strategy, instructional designers to develop your training content and materials, facilitators to deliver in-person or virtual training to your staff, LMS administrators to manage the process, virtual training producers to make sure your virtual training is engaging and effective, and coaches to support the learning after training is completed. If you don't have a training department, that's okay. Insignia can be your bolt-on training department. With Insignia, you get dedicated resources providing fractional services by specialists in their field. Whether it's onboarding new hires, upskilling your team, or ensuring compliance, Insignia designs impactful programs that stick. Visit insigniatraining.com to discover their full range of services and to schedule a free consultation. Insignia is your partner for training success.
Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is our life and leadership podcast where we're living out loud the pages of the books that are on our shelves. My name is Denise Russo. I'm here with my co-host, Sam Powell. We are in the final stretch of the book, The 5 Bold Choices by Coughlin and Larry Julian. Why do I every time, Sam, have to look at the cover to see the names of the authors? I'm not really sure. I think their names.
There's two, so it's not as it's not as straightforward as one person. But it's interesting. And for those of you that aren't reading along, but I definitely encourage you to read along, they actually label who wrote each chapter. So it'll be J in parentheses or Larry in parentheses. So you really are getting the perspective of two different individuals. This book is set up very differently than I think any other book that I've read. But the way they've set it up is very tangible and easy to read too. So yes, we are at the end today, but it is definitely a book worth peeling off the bookshelf for yourself and really reading, because there's lots of good, anecdotes and stories that they have in here that we didn't really touch on. But today this wrap up that they've got in this book, so how they end the 5 bold choices is appreciating the journey. And I love the way they ended this book. We've talked about making 5 bold choices. And these aren't things that you make a choice once and then you move forward. These are things that you are choosing all of the time. Some of them every single day, some of them maybe every hour or so, but you are making these choices constantly. And I love that they end this with appreciating the journey that you go on as you make these choices in life.
When you think about these two words, Sam, I'm curious what comes to mind. So appreciate versus depreciate.
I didn't think about, when I think of appreciate, I don't usually think about it in the context of depreciation or the antithesis to it, which is interesting. It's making, I don't know, my wheels are turning of, when I think about depreciate, I think about a financial portfolio right away, right? Things are depreciating in value. I drove my car off the lot, now it's worth less, right? My portfolio's, losing money instead of gaining money, that sort of thing. But I never think of appreciate as the opposite. But if I did, then if through the act of appreciation, I'm actually raising the value of whatever it is, which is interesting.
Yeah, so he actually starts the chapter by talking about how appreciation has 3 distinct meanings rolled into a powerful gift. So he says that to be fully aware of significance or magnitude of something. So in a case of, let's say, your car, when you bought it, you were probably really appreciating the significance or the magnitude of having this new vehicle in your family. The second is an expression of gratitude for something or someone, like, I really appreciate you. That's a gratitude. That's a gift. And the third being that it raises in value or price, especially over time. So where you might have a depreciation in your vehicle, you have an increase or an appreciation in things like art. And so what got me thinking in this chapter about appreciating the journey is valuing, not devaluing these experiences. In fact, off mic, we were talking about, Sam, how we can't believe we're at the last chapter of this. We record these episodes in advance of them coming out. And while we're in the moment of recording, I completely appreciate our conversations. We've read the chapters. We came prepared. We know the truth that we want to share. We have our stories on deck. But I want to make sure for my own life that I don't devalue the lessons that we've learned, the things that we've applied in the moment to be able to be sustainable and long-term in my life. So I'm so grateful to have gone on this journey with you on these 5 bold choices and to see how can I ensure that those stay at the top of my mind as I go through my days this year.
Yeah. And I think for me too, it's like, as much as no one likes listening to their own voice recorded back to them, I love listening to the episodes because it really helps me solidify or really sit in the journey and appreciate it in a different way, but also maybe like reenact it in my life too. It's like, oh, I was doing that and life happened and it slipped. And so I need to go back. So I was actually just thinking, I'm like, beginning of the year, probably should be re-listening to Atomic Habits and like revisiting some of that, because that is definitely, I've had a big life shift, in bringing a new family member in and things like that. And so need new habits. So maybe that'll be my next thing here I do for myself, is re-listening to that series, because sometimes we just got to revisit the things we've already gone through. But I love that as they're starting this chapter off, they say that appreciating your journey means, 1, you're able to discern the hidden value and significance of each circumstance, no matter how difficult. 2, you enjoy your journey. And 3, you make bold choices that raise the value of your journey as a result of wisdom gained. I really love the 3 points. The first one, when we're talking about discerning the hidden value and significance, and I think that I've naturally always been a type of person who's like very optimistic, can see the good in the bad, in the middle of something like that. But to think about that characteristic as really just being someone who's able to appreciate the journey regardless is, I think, it's kind of a new way for me to, I don't know, step outside myself and really observe, that kind of pattern of who I am. And I think that this is one of the things that has helped me the most in getting through really difficult situations in my life, and being able to appreciate the journey that I'm gone, the things that I've learned, the growth that's happened because of it. Like, it helps me deal with the bad things in life. It helps me deal with the darkest, worst moments of my life by still, the flip side of the coin is being able to appreciate, the journey, right? Like, I think about this about losing my son is, the one side of the coin is that I lost him, but the other is that I had him. And being able to having that skill set to be able to focus on the having and the appreciation of everything that I learned and the journey that we went on together, even though it was way shorter than it should have been or anyone would have ever liked it to be, helps me deal with the fact that the other side of the coin, the hurt, the grief, the fact that we lost him, right? And so I think that the being able to appreciate a journey and being able to discern significance in the circumstances and in the path that you follow is such a critical coping skill for people. And I think it's really appreciated in that context. It's really undervalued in that context. But for me, like as I read this, I was like, I really thought about that journey particularly, and then other similar, rough, tough journeys along the road. And I think that it lends to then the second one of it helps you enjoy the journey, right? Like if I know that regardless of the circumstances, I can appreciate, I can find this, then I can find enjoyment along the road too, right? Like I can still laugh in the middle of grief. I can still find those moments that are really beautiful in it. And so then, I think that lends to like your just overall happiness, right? Like I can enjoy this regardless of what's going on. And then I love the third thing of being able to make bold choices, obviously, because that's what this book is about, but making the bold choices that raise the value of your journey. Like I don't know, like that one I just really was kind of a different, like the other two were really reflective for me, but this one was, I think, like looking ahead of if I'm making bold choices, I can raise the value of my life, right? Of my journey. I can, really turn this into something magical through appreciating the fact that I can make bold choices. I can, design the life that I want.
What you just described is something that the author calls an appreciation muscle, and you have a really strong one. And so he goes on to describe that if you don't daily exercise your muscles, they will atrophy. And so when you think about what you've gone through, what you've been through, the obstacles you've been through, the trials and tragedies, as well as the triumphs, I would say, is that you've had a way to have consistent persistence through each of those things. So that has created an environment where appreciation is natural to you. It's normal for you. It is consistent for you. And so the book talks through in this final kind of chapter around it took time for them to get to this point because they had to go through their own challenges to get there. And so in the last part of this chapter, as Sam was just saying, each chapter is sort of written by one or the other of the authors. And this part was written by Jay. And he says in this last part that his 5 bold choices to find clarity, accountability, adaptability, confidence, and balance. Those are the 5 bold choices we've been through together. Clarity, accountability, adaptability, confidence, and balance. They all together contributed to overcoming the most challenging period in his life. And so he asked a question at the end of this part of the chapter that I highlighted the whole paragraph just because it got me to think about some of my own personal experience, which was, he said, do you appreciate your journey in spite of the difficult circumstances you're in? And for me, in the moment I read this, I didn't. I was going through something really challenging, about Sam, and I felt like, no, I don't appreciate the journey at all. I actually hate this ride and I want to get off. In fact, I saw a little meme or something this morning that said, if 2024 was a candle, and then in the picture, it was like a dumpster on fire. So, but I think we get to the end of every year and we can either think that or think the other way, right? You could say, was 2020 bad, or was 2020 a time of learning? Was 21 or 22 or 23 or 24 or, oh my God, we're in 2025 now. What's it going to be like this year? So do you appreciate your journey in spite of the difficult circumstances? Do you have a clear sense of who you are and where you're going? And for me, again, when I read that, the first time I read this book, which was, a couple years ago is when I first got this book. No, I didn't have a sense of where I was or who I was or where I was going. In fact, it was during a time that was quite turbulent for me in my professional life. And I even wrote in the margins that, no, I feel like I'm stuck. And it wasn't until I got with a coach that I got unstuck and where I could appreciate where I was so that I could clear the way to get me to where I wanted to go. And so he ends this by kind of saying, where do you go for wisdom, direction, peace, and support? But then he says, are you aware of the impact you have on others? And I've seen memes day after day that basically say something to the effect of, you could be the problem. You think all this other stuff happening around you is a problem, but what about you? Like, where's your self-awareness in all of this? Where's your centeredness, like we talked about last week. So these are really tough self-reflection questions. And I have to say, Sam, because I read this the second time after we spent an entire year reading about happiness, every question I just read, when I read it the second time, my perception was completely different. In fact, you talked about this, I think, last episode or maybe the one before, where if you're standing on one side, what is the perception that's on the other side? And for me, it's about the fact that when you read these books or you listen to our shows, they may impact you in the moment for something you are going through, but maybe they won't. And so that's why it's so valuable to go back. And that's why these books that are on our shelves, the best ones stay on our shelves. And I don't mean stay there getting dusty. They stay there because there's something we want to continue to lean into, to learn from, to go back into, to use as sort of like manuals. Because truly, when I answered those same questions the last time I read the book, which was just recently, I absolutely appreciate the journey. There's so much good that has come out of times that seemed like in the moment they were not good at all. And so these are the questions that I had to ask myself. And maybe I don't have all the answers all the time, but if you can seek truth and move forward, you're going to find not only a balance in the way that you have happiness in life, but I think what this book teaches you is that there's also joy and that those two things are different. And these 5 bold choices are a way to help bring you that balance that you need to rise above your circumstances, redefine your life if it does need redefinition, and to just move forward.
Yeah. And I think that that's like one of the big themes throughout this whole book is that both authors talk about hard, I mean, really hard, difficult situations. Like sounds a little depressing, right? When you think about like the what they really went through. But this is about making the choices to appreciate, like making the choices that lead you to be able to appreciate the journey in spite of the circumstances, to have a clear sense of who you are and where you're going. And, what they've encouraged us, right? And I think it was in the last chapter of like, you have the ability to do this. Like you can take life and grab it, and it's within your control despite what is happening to you. And there are 500 million books out there and stories out there of people who do just that, right? Here's this terrible thing that happened, and here's how I got through it, and here's how I found happiness and joy and peace and wisdom and direction and all of those good things in the end. But it really comes down to people making choices that lead them down the path of, I'm not going to appreciate this journey, right? Like I'm going to sit, like I was saying earlier, with the 2 flip sides of the coin. Like I'm going to sit on the lost side, or I'm going to sit on the have side, right? And the authors move on here to say that like appreciation really focuses us on what we have rather than what we don't. And I think that that's so very true. And sometimes that's just the exercise you have to go to, right? When you feel like, gosh, I'm in this horrible circumstance, gosh, there's all of this stuff. It's like, well, just pause for a minute and ask yourself, well, what do I have in this moment, right? What am I gaining? What is mine right now, right? Like what has been mine, and what is it on that end of the spectrum? And I think as you start to write that list out, like, oh, I have my health right now, or maybe that's a thing you're struggling with. So what else do you have, right? But everyone has a lot of things, or, tangibles, intangibles, that kind of stuff. What are those things that you have? And as you write that list out, it'll help you gain perspective on, I have a lot. There are things I don't have, sure. There's these things, this one thing that's really, incredibly difficult, but I can move forward, right? That there's a way to move forward through what I do have, through what I need, right? And I think getting back to that clarity, and the authors talk about these 5 bold choices. Really, they're not a path. It's not like you get clear, then you do that. It's like you move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just a continuous cycle, right? And it's like when you find yourself out of balance, right, which was the 5th bold choice, go back to clarity, right? Go back to that question you just asked us, Denise, of, do you know who you are? Do you know, do you have a clear sense of who you are and where you're going? And you've got to ask yourself these things all the time because you're making these choices all of the time.
Yeah. Well, let's do a quick summary then of the book, and then let's talk about what we get to do next week. So, as we look at what this book was all about, as Sam said, it's a cycle, it's a circle, it's not a process that is linear. And so, if you go back to the 5 bold choices that we just shared, awareness and appreciation is actually in every one of the 5 bold choices. So, for example, in the clarity chapter, the author helped us to really look at and discern how we prioritize things in life. What are the activities we prioritize? What are the goals that matter most to us in life? And again, we're going to talk about some of that, about how you do what matters most when we go through our special edition series on the 12-week year. So, number 1, clarity, how to prioritize. In the accountability chapter, I don't know. It's hard for me to say which one was my favorite chapter, but I really liked that chapter. He talked about an invaluable way to debrief your successes and your failures so that you could improve. And accountability sometimes is best with an accountability buddy, as Sam coined it, or with a coach. The 3rd chapter was adaptability, where he shared about how continuous learning helped him to really adapt to change. And I don't know, maybe that one was my favorite chapter. I think all of them were my favorite chapter. Now that I think back, that was a really good one about how you're in a continuous state of growth. And the only way to grow is to keep learning and to keep an open mind and to keep stretching. And then finally, he said in the confidence chapter, how to know your truth, making sure that you're prepared and that you know your truth. And then in the balance chapter, how to be courageous and have some self-examination, self-awareness, self-confidence, self-centeredness, if you will, on the positive side, because he gave an example where he had to make a really tough choice to quit his job as the CEO of something he was really striving to reach as a pinnacle for his career. And it gave him the biggest awareness that he needed, which led to appreciation, which again was weaved throughout that. So Sam, I'm curious about what your final takes are on this book, and if you can give us some secret insights into where we're headed next time.
Yeah, so I think my insight is a quote from the very last page of the book that I think perfectly ties into where we're headed from here. So the thing that I have highlighted is the very difficulty before you is the portal of your significance, and the bold choices you make now in these tough times will determine your better tomorrow. And I love that because I think that we are made in our toughest moments, right? Like that is where the rubber meets the road, where our character really shines through, not in maybe who we naturally are, but who we choose to grow into as these obstacles hit us, as these difficult moments hit us. And so I think that, like, as we think about these 5 bold choices and we hold to them and we really live them out loud, then as we face difficulty, as we face obstacles, we've got 5 things to cling to get us back onto the right path and to get us onto a path that does help us become who we were meant to be, what significance we are supposed to have in the world. Yeah. And so our next book is called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. This got really popular, I feel like, on TikTok about like a year and a half ago or something like that. So we're moving from these 5 bold choices. Again, like if you can cling to them and hold to them, it helps you move forward, but really now leaning into that the obstacles are the way through your life, and the obstacles really are the thing that, push us to be our best selves, that push us to be into that, right? Like leaning into the fact that life is not easy. Life is very hard sometimes, but it's those moments, it's those things that sharpen our saw, that, make us who we really are meant to become and the significance that we're meant to give to this world.
So, Sam, when we started this podcast, we had sort of a theme around looking at our core values and how to build or break habits. We spent an entire year on happiness. What can you share with our listeners about the theming that we have prepared for this year? I know we said it a little bit in the kickoff, but that was also the first week of January, and some people may have missed it. What can people really think about as we've chosen these books that we have?
Yeah, and I think for us, right, we labeled this year as about breaking boundaries. So this was coming off of a year of what does it take to pursue happiness and to get to a life of, a life of significance in the end, right? And to do the things and to take the actions that move us in that direction. But this year is a lot about life gets in the way, right? I mean, this book is that we've just finished is rising above your circumstances and redefining your life and giving you 5 things to do that. And so our theme for the year, for those of you that maybe missed our first episode, is breaking boundaries, and really focusing on bold moves for a resilient life. And so we're really leaning into the hard part, right? We leaned in last year to what does it take to really understand what happiness is and how to pursue a life that gets you in that space, but knowing that like the flip side of that coin is that life is tough. And we know from all of last year that your circumstances don't define your happiness, it's your actions. And so this is really leaning into when life is tough, right? When the obstacles come, what do you do? And at the end of the day, it's the choices that you make, right? And I think this book has taught us a lot about that and given us some really practical things to hold on to. And I'm really excited about where that takes us with the obstacle is the way, because that really is, leaning into that even more.
Mm-hmm. So friends, there will be links in our show notes. Thanks to our producer, Scott. We know you don't get to see him very often on the camera with us, but we have our magical Scott Miller in the background producing for us. So in the show notes, you'll see links to the book if you'd like to take a deep dive with us. Next week, we'll start on the beginning of that book. It's another sort of short read. It's a smallish kind of a book. And so I'm looking forward to going through that with you again, Sam. But for today, friends, we hope that you were able to take these 5 bold choices as a guidebook, especially if you feel stuck. If you want to get back on a path that maybe you were on once and you've kind of slipped off of, if we can help you in any way with coaching or giving you other content or materials, there will also be ways for you to reach out to us in the show notes. But for today, if this added value, we also ask that you share it with friends that can get value from this as well. It's the best kept secret that we don't want to have be a secret. My name's Denise Russo. This has been a fun, exciting, encouraging, interesting journey, another new year, and another new episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.